to another episode of Race Report, Viva el Matador edition. So, to start off FP1, we already had excitement. The rookies were on track. We had Pato, Ollie, Kimi, Drogovic, and Schwartzman, and they finished out for FP1. 12 and 13 was Kimi and Pato, and then 18, 19, and 20 was Drogovic, Schwartzman, and then Ollie. And then Schwartzman had a 5-place grid penalty, even though he does not race. That'll be interesting. And then our permanent rookies, Lawson and Colapinto, were in 9th and 11th.
FP1 was exciting right off the bat. There was an early red flag due to some debris on the track that Kimi Antonelli actually ended up running over. It looked like it was possibly from Max's car. Max was stating that he did have something wrong with the engine and had no power.
So FP1 had not only one, but two red flags, because then we had Mr. Alex Albon causing another red flag, and his little accident, I guess he really was driving out of control, to be honest, and his little out of control moment also caught up Mr. Ollie Behrman, who got some damage, and then Alex proceeded to blame the incident on Ollie when it was very clearly not Ollie's fault. So we had that, and then going into FP2, it was a little bit of a different setup. Normally we just have 1 hour free practices, but this was an hour and a half because it was a testing session for Pirelli. So they were all on the special test tires, which was the C6 tire in the Pirelli range, which is the softest tire. And so, yeah, they were just testing that. And Max continues to comment on some weird noises and stuff going on with his car. He thinks that there are some issues, and he just keeps going on the radio and complaining. It's just typical Max, but it ends up that it's a power unit problem that we find out later on.
After two incidents in FP1, you have to imagine we can't keep getting them. There can't be more. Wrong. George Russell has a huge crash, alarmingly bad. It was, I think, 30 G's of force, and he ends up being taken off to the medical center in the medical car. It does end up getting reported that he is okay and he's fine and he's able to race for the weekend. But shortly after that, Toto does say and admit to the press that Mercedes is now worried about the cost cap, because not only have they had the crash during free practice this week, they had George's qualifying crash last week, they had Lewis spinning out. It's been non-stop repair work for the Mercedes team. Speaking of that repair work, going into FP3, Mercedes basically had to use their last allowance for breaking curfew to stay up all night and fix George's car, so it was able to even run for FP3. And if they break any more curfews, for the rest of the season, they will get a substantial penalty for it.
Point of car issues, Max's car did get fixed. It was an air intake issue. The car was fitted with an older power unit so that they did not go over their allotment and be sort of put in the same position as he's in this race. But there was definitely a difference between, you could definitely see the McLarens were outpacing everyone else. There were definitely some people who were not so happy about that, mainly Lewis, but I think that's understandable with his performance last race and then sort of not stellar performance in this race as well.
Yes, so another thing about Max's car and putting in an old power unit, looks like he will have to take a grid penalty in Brazil, and if not in Brazil, definitely in Qatar, to fit that new power unit, because I don't think they can probably keep running the old one. And then on to qualifying. I loved this qualifying session because a lot of my guys did really well. Carlos was on pole, and I was literally had my computer set up in my bathroom, and I was getting ready, watching qualifying, and I was my God, Carlos is gonna get pole. And both of his laps were good enough to get pole. He didn't have to do another lap. His provisional pole lap would have secured him, and he went and did it twice, and no one else's lap times were faster than him. So we had, obviously, Carlos on pole, and then Max got P2, Lando P3, and then Charles in P4. So the same top four as last weekend, just shuffled up a little bit. And then both of the Haas guys did extremely well again, both into Q3. K-Mag outqualified Hulkenberg again. So love to see that.
I swear at this point, since K-Mag's race ban, he has come back like better than ever.
I
It's
know.
incredible.
Outqualifying Nico like 2 weekends in a row. And I mean, we'll get into it later, but he like beat Nico in the race as well. So it's like, props to K-Mag.
It's the Chipotle of it all.
It is. It's the Chipotle of it all.
Said, I'm taking the motto, go big or go home, to heart, and I will go big before I go home.
Honestly, I love to see it for him.
It's K-Mag's best finish since 2020. His P7.
Well, we talked about the drivers that had good qualifying sessions. Let's talk about the drivers who had bad qualifying sessions. I think two big ones that stood out were Oscar, who is out in Q1, finishes P17, or is going to be starting the race P17. You know, Mexico's hometown hero, Checo, same thing, out in Q1 for the umpteenth time this season.
Say that's not even a standout at this point. Like, that's
I know.
Just typical Checo. If he had gotten into Q3, I'd be like, wow, he did it, guys.
I mean, I mean it in the sense of it's his home race. I was at least expecting like a little bit more.
Exactly.
But he starts the race P18, and then as if all of the other crashes were not enough, Yuki crashes out during qualifying, and his red flag prevents a lot of other drivers from a chance at improving their lap time. Namely, like Liam Lawson was one of the people who was on a really good lap and kind of got screwed by I think both of the Aston Martins were affected negatively or not as well. So that's it's tough for Yuki, especially right now. And I think we were all saying that I feel like he's making mistakes because he's so stressed out about the competition between him and Liam that's now been like put in his face.
To race day. Very exciting opening lap. I mean, I think we all very much anticipated lap one to be very exciting, and honestly, it did not disappoint. It was exciting to see, however, and the rumor is sort of like pole position for Mexico is not necessarily the best position to start out, but Carlos for just doing what he did. And more on Yuki crashing out. He crashes again, unfortunately, in the first lap, which I think we can kind of same song and dance of he's probably under a lot of pressure, and that probably makes it intense and stressful scenario to perform in, which might have played into some of that. I don't know. And then Max says take lead in lap one, but
yes, I think it's crazy because we were all talking about, I think we were all texting, and I think I had mentioned something about how typically P2 and P4 actually have the best odds. So we were like, okay, it's going to be good for Charlie. But we were really expecting that at least in that first corner, something was going to go down between Max and Lando, or like one of the top four was going to crash into someone else. And by some miracle, none of them had any problem. Carlos loses the lead to Max, but whatever.
I mean, I was shocked that the top four, there wasn't any incidents, because like I really fully thought that there was going to be contact between them. I mean, I knew there was going to be contact in turn one of lap one in Mexico, because I mean that's like inevitable. But yeah, Yuki, I felt so bad for him. I know, I feel like he probably has so much pressure on him, but I feel like his accident was kind of unavoidable though, because I mean, looking back at the replay, he was on the edge and then Albon was in the middle. And I think it was Pierre, and basically there was just no room and they all kind of got squeezed together, and Yuki being on the curb was the one to lose a tire and like
take
hit
Albon
the brunt of that.
Him.
and took Albon with him. And I guess Pierre survived it, but yeah, the two of them unfortunately did not survive.
I feel like they're also like both in the same situation right now where like Yuki has the Liam pressure and Albon has the Franco pressure, and like you're seeing the visible effects of it while they're qualifying, while they're racing. Like this was a bad weekend for both of them, and it made them both look really bad next to their rookie teammates.
Also, more to the point, we are seeing them take more aggressive racing positions, which I think led maybe to this crash. Like if they weren't under such immense pressure, one of them would have pulled back just this minute to, end up in a crash. But it'll be interesting to see how they race the rest of the year, if they're going to continue to make these sort of aggressive moves and if it will play out in their favor, or if we will end up having more crashes from Alex and Yuki.
I just have been enjoying that we got Burt Mylander 2 weekends in a row. I'm sure he's so happy to get to drive around some more. Yeah, we went from not having him at all to 2 weekends in a row. So Brazil, 3-peat, Burt, you coming back? Who's going to crash out?
Back, Burt.
Give us Burt.
That's on who is going to crash out.
I can witchcraft some stuff together if you guys want.
Witchcraft, Julia. Only bad juju.
I mean, Checo might just crash anyways. Ocon might just crash without witchcraft. Who else would crash without witchcraft? George, Stroll.
Yes.
Unfortunately, Yuki.
Unfortunately, Albon.
Just had to take half the grid out.
It's like the Valtteri goes bowling.
That takes me back to, what was it, Australia last year, 2023, when it literally was like half the grid was out of the race.
The 3 red flags in one race.
I wouldn't be mad about it. It keeps it exciting.
Brazil is always a good race.
But back to the race itself before we go to, I mean, this is fun, but Kaylee had mentioned Carlos was in the lead. He loses the lead to Max. He does take that back lap 9 of the race, and that leads to some fighting between Max and Lando over P2. While they're so busy fighting, Charles Leclerc, the man that he is, takes advantage of that and passes both of them. After the week that we had in Austin, it was a really weird feeling to see and hear it come over the broadcast that Max is getting penalties. He got 2 10-second penalties, so 20 seconds. No, I'm not bitter about it. I want everyone to get penalties. I want it to be like Oprah. You get a penalty, because it makes it more exciting strategically to see like how are you going to fix this.
The 10-second penalties too, because 5-second penalties do absolutely nothing. So I think they should all be 10 or high. No, actually, they need to do drive-through penalties, like where you can't perform your pit stop. Like you have to just drive through the pit lane, and you can't stop and like change your tires while you're there, like they do in NASCAR and IndyCar, because that will actually make a bigger disadvantage because there's so many gaps. Like, like Franco later on gets a 10-second penalty, he still finishes in the same position. Like they're not like, I feel like a drive-through. Because it takes like 25 seconds to drive through the pit lane, or 20 something seconds. Yeah, I think they should bring drive-through penalties to F1. That's my hot take.
That's fun. I like it. But 2 10-second penalties, 1 for leaving the track and gaining advantage, which is funnily enough what Lando got last week. And then a second penalty for pushing another driver off the track, which Max potentially should have gotten last week.
Yeah, it was kind of wild. All of a sudden it's like, oh, Max gets a penalty, and then it comes over again. Max gets another penalty, and I was like, this is actually crazy. But then I was like, honestly, he's probably gonna end up right near where he started, but it's Max. Anyone else, it would have ruined their race. But yeah, so Charles, as we said earlier, because of Max and Lando's little whatever they were doing, pushing each other off the track, is able to get P2. And much later on in the race, I really don't know what he was doing. He had some sort of mistake that he made that caused him to like go wide off the track and quite literally almost hit the barrier. And watching him rewatch it in the cool down room. He was just like laughing at himself. I'm like, bro, you could have completely ruined your race right there. But he was just like, it's so funny. So yes, he in turn loses that P2 position. Lando is right there to take it from him, and he does not have the pace to get it back from him, because pretty much once the McLarens, their race pace is so good that once they get past you, they're going to stay ahead of you.
They stay past.
Yes. So he did that. And then kind of flashing back to what I was saying about Max earlier, he did get those 20-second penalties, and it didn't really affect him that much. I mean, he started P2 and ended P6, but still, to go from a 20-second penalty at the beginning of the race to literally cutting your way through the field and making it look so easy to come back for...
after he served his penalties.
He came out, P15 right ahead of Checo.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So to come back up to 6th by the end of the race, like just behind the Mercedes, and he literally just made it look so easy. He was like, excuse me, coming through.
Part ways.
So yeah.
It was like parting the sea. He was just like,
I mean, I hope he was at least entertained by it, because like we all said at the beginning of the season when he had a 30-second lead, dude's bored. At least now he's got something to do.
Exactly. So I'm sure he enjoyed his little adventure through the grid.
His side quest.
And then his side quest. And then once again, Haas, my boys, absolutely killing it with the double points. K-Mag, P7, Hulkenberg, P10. When they're in the Americas, something changes, and it'll be interesting to see if that translates into South America, because we're moving continents to go to Brazil. I hope it continues.
They hit the Western Hemisphere and light up, dude.
If the continent ends in America, then they're like, yes, we're great here. So when they go to Qatar and Abu Dhabi, they're probably not going to be very good. Hopefully not, but that was very impressive. So last weekend, they overtook Visa Cash App RB in the Constructors' Championship, and now there is a 10-point lead that they have created on them. And thanks to Yuki, because his crash helped them in qualifying, because they had just gotten their like banker flying laps in, and then he crashed, and then the RBs weren't able to get good laps. So Yuki really helped us out there. Damn. So thank you, buddy.
Speaking of incredible drives, even though he had a pretty bad, one of his worst qualifyings all season, Oscar made a amazing recovery up to the points. So he recovered from P17 all the way to P8. So not even like bottom of the points, but like fairly into it. Time and time again, we just keep getting to see Oscar's growth in the sport, and the way that he is so quickly growing compared to other drivers like Lando or Charles over time is exponentially impressive. And his dad, Mark Webber, should be proud. Someone who did not have a great drive, Mr. Fernando Alonso. He did have to... It was his 400th race start. He did have to retire the car with mechanical issues. A little fun fact, if you didn't know, this is not the first time an anniversary has gone poorly for him. He did DNF his 200th, 300th, and then this being his 400th race start. So I think he needs to do like a sage cleansing,
or just run Nico Rosberg out of his garage.
That too. Stay out of here. The Nico Rosberg curse. Awful.
Like, Alonso's 400th race.
DNF.
Doomed.
Fortunately, favorite rookies received a post-race penalty for an incident with Liam Lawson. He received a 10-second penalty, which ended up doing nothing, and then also 2 points on his license. And then...
That was fast.
Huh?
I was going to say, that was fast. He's already got points on his license.
I thought you were talking about my speed of talking. I was like, I didn't think I was talking that fast.
Dude's what, like four races in?
This is in.
Not even.
Already got 2.
He's got more points than the last 2 drivers that he replaced combined, so he's just making up for that time. He's doing everything at an accelerated pace.
He's trying to get as many penalty points as Latifi.
Our goat Latifi, our safety
Go
car
Tiffy.
reliable friend.
Evie. And to continue the Bucheco event, I'll start, and then he also damaged his side pod. This was just an overall great race for Checo. Lauren will touch, or Julia will touch more probably on the fastest lap incident that all sort of had us giggling at the end. We were all texting, we're like, commentators. It's not just us, even the commentators.
It's
on
everyone.
ESPN,
Everyone.
TV, I'm sure Sky Sports also made points out that Checo, our fastest lap, didn't even manage that. So
I think it sucks too that his like damage to his side pod was because he was trying to fight Liam Lawson, and Liam was like, "Dude, you are slow. Leave me alone."
Yeah, like he was fighting Liam Lawson in like
recklessly,
but like in the step down car of the Red Bull, like in the whatever
and losing
Racing Bulls version, and losing, and then also the fact that it's your home race and you can't even get your start right. Like, I mean, that's a mix between like it being Checo's fault and his team's fault, but the fact that you're past your grid box, like seriously.
Radio message after that was so funny, and he's like, "No,
funny." He goes,
"It was
a great start."
That to me gives I have concepts of a plan.
Literally. And so he got a 5-second penalty for that, and came last. He
of the cars that didn't DNF.
Yes. So
I was talking to my
the last
mom,
running
and she
car.
goes, "Isn't that bad?" I would go, "Mama, I'm DNF'd. He was the last on the grid, still racing." And she goes, "That's not good."
No,
my mother, who knows about F1 except for what I tell her, recognizes that did not finish
great.
well.
Not great.
Right. As Will Buxton would say, if you're in the back at the end of the race, you are in last and you lost. Like Kaylee was saying, fight, and I'll use that word loosely for fastest lap. So I don't think it was the last lap of the race, last couple laps of the race.
2 laps to go is when Ferrari
gets on the radio to Charles and says, "Come in box, like we're going to do fastest lap." Because you know what, like he lost the P2 spot. The best case scenario is at least he'll get the fastest lap point while it still exists. So he goes in, gets softs, and sends it full send for a fastest lap. Red Bull takes that to say, well, Checo's already in literally the lowest place he can be at the moment, so why don't we just bring him in too and do the same thing? And it becomes a competition, again, loosely using that term, for fastest lap, which with everything that Checo had dealt with that race and the side pod damage and whatnot, I don't understand how they thought new tires were suddenly going to give him fastest lap.
Wings, because they sure did not.
Literally, Red Bull wings. So long story short, Charles Leclerc secures fastest lap, gets an extra point. Should be happy about it. Isn't the most happy at the podium, but I think that's for him to self-reflect on.
Yes.
Words for his character, but
he was being a baby. I love him, but he was being a baby.
The fastest lap thing, like the fact that just shows how much of a pace difference there is. I mean, we saw it in Austin last weekend, but it was even more this weekend of how much of a gap there is between the, I guess, Formula like A plus right now being like the McLarens and the Ferraris and Max, and then the Mercedes being like Formula A, and there being enough time for Charles to be in P3 to be able to take a pit for fastest lap and still come out in P3 in front of the Team Mercedes. Like that, it just shows how much of a race pace
there was
differential.
Still, even after he came out of the pit stop, he still had a 9-second gap to George behind him, which is nuts. There's 14 different races happening, and the top 5 is 5 of them.
Yeah. So once once Carlos regained the lead in like lap 9, he held P1 the entirety of the race. He drove a great race, no mistakes, perfect, killed it, slayed the whole weekend. He also won Driver of the Day, and Lando finished P2 and Charles P3. So we finally got our Car Lando podium that Julie and I have been wanting. So that was exciting. And 2 Ferrari wins back to back, which really truly feels like a fever dream. And I'm not complaining about it. So yeah, because after Charles won, I was like, and it was like Ferrari 1-2 in Austin. I was like, okay, I love this, but I would love it to be role reverse for next week because I really need Carlos to win at Ferrari again. So shout out to Ferrari for listening to me, Carlos, and thank you for doing that for me because I needed that for my like mental health. So I'm not ready for him to leave and go to Williams. That TikTok that one of you sent about being like,
I was literally, as Lauren was speaking, the cogs were working in my little brain. My hamster was spinning on the wheel, and I was like, I have to bring this up because I love to traumatize my friends with sad TikToks. If I have to be sad,
she really does. She really does.
Saw this girl talking about it. It's like the new generation will remember Carlos as we remember Bottas, and I was like, stake me out now because that put me in the grave. What?
Stake you out like Valtteri at stake.
Well, what made it so much sadder too is that I watched Valtteri at Mercedes, so saw Valtteri win, and then people who started watching F1 after that, they're like, Valtteri sucks. Whoa, how's he up at Mercedes? I'm like, he was a race like multiple time race winner. Like he's a great driver. Like he did great at Williams. He did great at, like the other teams he's been at. I'm like, Stake just really sucks, and I'm like, it was sad to like see that and then hear what people said about Valtteri who like didn't know Valtteri at Mercedes and be like, are people going to talk about Carlos that way? Like this guy sucks. It was a really sad moment. I don't like it.
Well, while we're on the sad train, I think it's only fair to bring up the fact that now this could be our last C-squared podium in red, and that sucks a lot.
Brazil.
The rest of the season's going to be good for them.
Vegas. I totally see them going to Vegas.
4 more races, so you have 4 more
also,
C-squared podiums.
4 races, Ferrari is typically quite good at. So I'm like feeling hopeful. Also, important thing to note, on top of it being a Car Lando podium, it was both Lando and Carlos's 25th podium each. So they got to celebrate that together. And I think that's really romantic.
I love my gay sport.
F1 is for the twinks.
And then the fact that Lando went out with the whole Sainz family for dinner that night to celebrate their like podium and win. It was so cute.
When you finally make it with your friend and their parents are like, no, come out to dinner when they come and visit at like school or something. And they're like, no, bring, so-and-so to dinner. Their family too. And you're like,
and Carlos Sainz Sr. was like, let me get the bill. Don't worry about it. And Lando's like, I'm a millionaire. Like, I can pay the bill. I think also, we were all saying it to Carlos's girlfriend, Rebecca. Her reaction
so cute
to watching him win was so heartwarming. And like, at the end of the day, I'm just happy to see like him happy. Mm. And like, you could tell
hugging his mom when he was like,
him like so emotional on the podium.
And her phone case that has the confetti from the podium in it. So cute. They're adorable, and I really like her.
She's just a girl.
She's really grown on me.
She's just like us.
She's just a girl, and
confetti in the phone case that really sealed it for me. It was like, she's just like us.
Because that's just like that's like a normal girl thing to do. Because she could get like a custom case done that like subtly hints Ferrari, and she's like, here's my clear phone case with confetti for my boyfriend.
Yeah,
I think that's so really cute. I do really want to see a video of both of them talking because they both have such severe accents.
Yeah, it's like her accent,
I can only imagine.
It doesn't match her, like how she looks. Like every time she opens her mouth, I'm like, that it doesn't go together. It like really throws me off.
Okay. Since we've gone through basically the entire race weekend in order, time to touch on the rules. It's been a big discussion since Austin and penalties. Early on in this race weekend, McLaren had appealed the penalty that Lando was given, and it was denied because they said that they had like substantial new evidence that they didn't have at the time. And again, we kind of discussed this last week that like the original like protests that they put in were based on the wrong facts and evidence, and that's what hurt them. So at this point, it's like stop wasting resources on it and just move on, moving forward. And I think it was better that they put their energy more into basically saying to the FAA and to the stewards that like this needs to be policed better. So there was a driver briefing held that discussed rules would be getting changed regarding pushing other drivers off of the track, specifically in regards to pushing another driver off the track and yourself also going off the track to do it. George allegedly said in one of his interviews that 19 out of the 20 drivers agreed to the rule updates and were happy to have them put into effect basically immediately. And there was one person that did not agree with these rule updates. And I think we can all healthily assume that it was Max, because this, like we've said in the past, Max has caused rule changes before. Lauren literally said last episode, like, Max is the reason that they change the rules all the time. How long do you think it's going to be till they do it? A week. Turns out it's been a week.
Didn't take very long.
I think that's an important thing to note update-wise, that we're going to be seeing some further rule changes. And I hope, I mean, we know that the FIA is nothing but inconsistent. I hope maybe that helps improve it even slightly.
I think my favorite part about all the rule penalties and rule changes and appeals was Christian Horner, who truly had it printed out. Like him trying to like argue against Max's penalties with the telemetry and like all this, like sitting there printed out, and then like all the reporters' phones just like around him too. Like that picture was so wild. Funny. He was like, I really truly have it printed out. I was like, oh my god.
That photo reminded me of the photo of like Max in the like paddock holding his own press conference. It was the same thing to me.
Now on to sort of rumor mill and drama. So there's been some speculation and some talk, pretty much, I would say,
all season,
at least more heavily talked about maybe earlier before some of the breaks, that Mexico was going to be Checo's last race, that either it would be announced at Mexico or after Mexico that Checo would be of the Red Bull car. And there was also some rumors that kind of filtered down. Checo did not perform well, be his last race indefinitely. And I think we can all agree that it was not necessarily a stellar performance. So we'll see if he is in there for Brazil.
I saw something about like, well, maybe they told him to pit to try and get him fastest lap the same way that they did to Danny before literally stabbing Danny in the back. And I was like,
except for Daniel was able to get a fastest lap, but Checo wasn't.
But could you imagine that?
Sad is that you come in last?
Well, I mean, he did have damage, so I'll give him that. But still,
mid last, fastest lap, pitiful.
I'm not gonna lie, honestly, like I am not a big fan of him, but if we get like a breaking news announcement and it's that like he's just out of the car, like
maybe like annoyed, honestly,
evil.
Like I'm just gonna be irritated. Like mean. Just let him finish his last 4 races and then can him out. Like we have 4 races left. Like he's already lost you the constructors. Like taking him out and putting someone else in is not going to change that. So like let the man finish his season. We don't need you to boot out another one of your drivers mid-season and then put someone else in it for 2025. Like 5 out of 6 contracts.
The consistent thing about Red Bull is they're inconsistent drivers.
It's giving Aaron McLaren.
And then
it feels like a callback to, what was it? Danny left, and then it was Pierre in the C, and then Pierre got demoted, and then it was Albon in the C, and then Albon got replaced by Checo. It's just like it never ends with them. Yes, the Red Bull musical chairs with wings.
On a lighter note, we all collectively want Franco to go to Red Bull. Please and thank you.
To go anywhere. I want Franco
Anywhere that gives
Colapinto
him a
in
seat.
a seat.
That gives him a seat. More specifically, Red Bull. To put
A
him in the
fast
seat
one.
where Checo was, I wouldn't complain. The likelihood of that actually happening, slim to none. We think they should move Yuki up and then have a Lawson Franco dynamic.
It would be so good.
Heard little whispers on the internet that maybe Alex's seat is not as secure as he would like to believe, and I'm Alex with my whole heart. I want the record to reflect that. Pinto Sainz power team up in Williams
Would also be fun.
Yeah,
so
it would be great.
But Albon has been given so much pain and suffering in F1. If they did that to him, like
James Vowles would be dead to me.
I'm still kind of mad at him about Logan. That would be like the line, and that would be because he's talked about how like Alex Albon is rebuilding the team, and if they destroy Alex Albon in a way like that, it's on sight.
Like they're gonna lose all their fans.
Yeah,
not above it. We've seen this in the past. Doesn't have the budget to keep Alex on anyway, since he spent all of it schmoozing Carlos.
I think Alex is like willingly getting underpaid because it's either you get underpaid or you're not in F1. The disparity between the top teams and the bottom teams, Williams did also just get that massive influx of capital.
Sponsors, yeah.
So to our last sort of call out for the drama central, Liam has seemed to pick a bone with every driver on the track. Last week it was Alonso. This week it's Checo. Next week it's going to be Lewis. Like he's going through them. I mean, this week it was rightly so. And even last week, Liam had his props. So good for him for like, I guess, sticking to it. But I just think it's so funny. It definitely feels like older grumpy dog and the little yippy dog just like nipping at their heels. It makes me think of that a little tiny bit. But I mean, this time, and Liam, we discussed the merits of him having to apologize for flipping Checo off and thinking it was kind of unjust, but probably to save him from the Checo fans, he had to. Beyonce saved the Checo fans on him.
Dude, his comment section
it was
right
only
now,
right that Liam had to apologize for it.
It is ruthless in his comments right now. It is so aggressive.
It's giving Canapino fans against Teo Pourchaire and Callum Ilott.
Poor Teo. Poor Ilott.
Literally, but it's so iconic. And major props to Liam. Our Gen Z drivers that are coming in
don't care.
Just changing the game, and they're bringing back Prime F1, which I appreciate because I need the time when we're flipping each other off. I love how they literally just don't care. The flipping off was iconic, and that was just like a knee-jerk reaction. And like he wasn't probably thinking about, that's Checo, we're in Mexico. Maybe not the best idea. I might not be safe after this. Like he was just like, what is this guy doing? Flip him off. And it was so good. And it's giving IndyCar, it's giving willpower, it's giving old F1.
Media training. All we need them to do is to bring back the chain as the old F1 intro. And this is how we know we're back it to the prime F1.
I really just want them to stop media training all of the drivers.
It's ruined F1. It has ruined the sport. Like, I need early 2000s, late 90s F1 back, please.
Or throwing hats at each other. I want dirty looks in the paddock. All out. I want NASCAR fist fights in the paddock. Like,
I want Michael Schumacher running through the paddock getting ready to fight someone. Like, that's what I need back.
Give up. Like, they can keep their media training. Bring us back the driver briefings. Please. With all of them in a room together. Please. That would be great. Because all right, it's been a minute since we last did one of these. I think it's only fair. I think this was a good enough weekend that very iconically we all have a brat and an ick, at least one, if not more. So I will take the lead on my brat corner this week. Is honestly kind of a fully packed household. First on the list is going to be Liam Lawson for flipping off Checo because I think it's hilarious. And you do you, boo boo. Second is Carlos for the spicy drive that he did. I did vote for him for driver of the day twice on my regular app and on my incognito window because I wanted him to win.
I'm glad you did that because I was not able to because I was indeed sitting in the dark on my yoga mat watching the last few laps before my yoga class started.
Good.
And so therefore I wasn't able to vote. So I'm glad that you were able to vote twice so you could vote for me. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. And then I do have, weirdly enough, 2 honorable mentions. I think not full brat tier, but like the essence was there. First is George Russell. After his engineer got on the radio and said, Max has 20 seconds of penalties, and he just went, wow. Because a 3-letter word, and it said everything it needed to. And then my other honorable mention, Charles Leclerc for accidentally swearing in the post-race conference. And then immediately being like, I'm so sorry, I don't want to get sent to Max. Like, don't make me do community service. Also really funny because we all agree that this whole swearing in the press conference rule is a bunch of absolute nonsense. It's
wackadoodle.
These are grown men.
Yeah. I agree heavily with all of Julia's brats, but my number one brat for the weekend was Mr. Pato O'Ward. He just embodies brat energy constantly, I feel like. But he showed up in Mexico and had like a meetup thing in like a mall. And it looked like One Direction was there with like the amount of fans that came out. Sorry, R.I.P. Liam.
That came from it. He was going to die. Like I thought they were going to crush him and then tear pieces out of his body, and like carry away little souvenirs of Pato with them. With how intense those fans were.
It was
crazy.
Like
it was packed out. Everyone cheering his name. He like literally was like, I feel like a pop star because that was like the kind of crowd
Pato, you are
that
a pop
there
star.
was. Yeah, and like rolling that into my ick. Well, this is not like my main ick, but rolling that into that is IndyCar, because what the heck, IndyCar is saying that Pato, or not IndyCar, the CEO of IndyCar, Mark Miles, saying that Pato is not popular enough for them to have a race in IndyCar in Mexico, and then he shows up to Mexico and they're like so excited to see him, and they book out a whole mall of people going absolutely crazy after he was there, doing his little meet and greet. I'm like, okay, so I'm sure literally everyone who's packed into that mall could sell out the entire IndyCar race like as soon as she put tickets up. So I don't really know what they were thinking.
Zach Brown wearing the Who's Pato hat as a
the Pato Who, yeah.
Iconic.
So good. It was so good.
For my brat, that Julia and then also Lauren said, along with Zach Brown wearing the Pato Who hat, that is icon behavior. It's a lot of wrong, but Zach Brown does pull out a lot of right sometimes. So, and then a callback to last week, because Julia, when you mentioned George and him saying wow, his what week ago, I just want to add that to the back corner. His what?
He doesn't always have the best radio responses like yabba dabba doo, but sometimes they hit. This hit. Wow. I don't know if it was Lewis.
They're just great.
Someone said something like, it might have been Lewis, who was like, oh, about time, or like something like that. And I was like, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
This part I thought like fairly long on this, and I honestly, there was only one answer, and I'm sorry, Mexico. Like, Mexico, I love you. Don't be mad at me. Don't hate me. Can we please mutually agree that Checo's performance was not good this weekend? That's my ick. And more specifically, that not only was his performance not good, his attitude about it was unrealistic. And that's it.
Truth. For me, there was someone who icked me out even more. And that was the jump scare that I got because I normally watch on F1 TV. I switched to the international broadcast so I can hear my Sky Sports guys. I'm watching Free Practice 1 to see Pato. I know we don't watch Free Practice 1, but I mean, Pato, so I was watching. And it's my normal guys, and all of a sudden I hear this agitating, grating voice, and I literally had a physical reaction and instantly was like, F1 TV, put it back, put it back. If you can't already guess who that agitating, grating voice is, it is none other than Miss Danica Patrick.
At least Jensen didn't have to be here this weekend.
Was spared. Unlike the rest of us who had the horrors persist, Jensen got a break.
How she has a job still with them, I don't understand. No one wants her there. She does a terrible job. She's not interested in what she's saying at all. She speaks in such a deadpan voice. And like the clip of her standing in the stadium section, and she's like, yeah, it's almost like a stadium here. I'm like, maybe because it is a stadium that they turned
She's
into
just
her.
not informed.
Yeah. So it's getting more views on F1 TV's broadcast for sure, because I'm sure a lot of people who maybe used to switch over to Sky are switching back over to F1 TV. Also because you get to hear the wonderful insights of James Hinchcliffe if you watch F1 TV
I
for the past 2
literally
weekends.
watched it just for Hinch this weekend.
And the Dallas Cowboys cheerleader video, that is brat, because we didn't see it last weekend. Oh my god. Back up to the brat corner to talk about this. Hinch, so they obviously filmed this one for the Austin GP, but it wasn't shown until FP2, and they're like, at the end, like, for a treat for staying with us this long, let's throw back, and then they're like, okay, Joel and Palmer, you love to do an analysis on this. They show Hinch doing this, like, dance kickline thing with the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders. Then after it, they pause it, slow it down, and Joel and Palmer gives a, like, in-depth analysis of Hinch's performance of the dance.
Dead.
And it was
not only
so good.
It's even better too because in Singapore they made him do that TikTok where he was like, the landscaping slay, like in all like Gen Z language. And he thought that like he would do one clip, and they're like, no, you're doing the whole video.
I cannot wait for Rossi and Tim to make fun of him for this video in the next Off Track episode.
Great.
I'm looking forward to that.
I agree with everything Julia said and then everything Lauren said. I really have nothing valuable to add other than that.
I mean, I think communal agreement is a good thing because it means that we're all right. Right? If 3 out of 3 think that it's correct, then it's probably correct.
We love you. Good night. Race report.